Respected minds often forget this simple truth. Life is quietly billing you every day for what you ignore and generously rewarding you for what you consistently protect. Not loudly, not dramatically, but patiently, until one morning you wake up either wealthy in wisdom and peace or bankrupt in regret. Let me begin with an idea Charlie Munger would appreciate deeply, because it's uncomfortable, rational, and brutally honest. Most destruction in life doesn't come from dramatic mistakes. It comes from small acts of neglect repeated daily. It's the email you never send, the walk you never take, the book you never open, the apology you delay, the skill you meant to learn someday. Neglect doesn't announce itself as danger. It shows up dressed as comfort. It whispers, "Not today." And that whisper, repeated long enough, becomes the loudest voice shaping your destiny. Think about the human body. Nobody wakes up one morning unhealthy by accident. It happens through years of quiet neglect, skipped sleep, ignored movement, another meal chosen for convenience instead of nourishment. Nothing feels costly in the moment. In fact, neglect often feels like relief. You get to rest, you get to postpone, you get to avoid discomfort. But the bill doesn't disappear. It compounds. And one day, the cost arrives with interest, demanding payment when you're weakest. Charlie Munger often spoke about inversion. Instead of asking how to succeed, ask how people fail. Most people fail by neglecting obvious things for a very long time. They neglect relationships until trust erodes. They neglect learning until relevance fades. They neglect discipline until chaos feels normal. They neglect character until shortcuts become habits. And then they act surprised when life reflects back exactly what they practiced. Here's the painful part. Neglect feels harmless because it's invisible in the short term. Consistency feels hard because it demands effort without immediate reward. That's the great psychological trap. The human brain is wired to prioritize now over later. So we trade a future we could be proud of for a present that feels slightly easier. Munger would call this a failure of rational thinking, a failure to respect compounding, both good and bad. Now let's talk about consistency, because this is where the story turns hopeful. Consistency is not dramatic. It doesn't trend. It doesn't impress people quickly. It's boring, repetitive, and often lonely. But consistency has a secret power. It compounds silently in your favor. One page a day becomes wisdom. One workout becomes strength. One honest conversation becomes trust. One disciplined choice becomes identity. Most people misunderstand consistency. They think it requires motivation. It doesn't. It requires systems, humility, and patience. Munger believed in building simple habits that reduce stupidity rather than chasing brilliance. Consistency is exactly that. It's not about doing extraordinary things. It's about refusing to do obviously foolish ones repeatedly. Consider two people starting at the same point, same intelligence, same resources, same opportunities. One neglects small responsibilities, the other handles them consistently. After 1 year, the difference is barely noticeable. After 5 years, it's undeniable. After 10, it's irreversible. This is not luck, this is math. This is compounding at work. Neglect erodes self-trust. Every time you break a promise to yourself, something inside you weakens. You start believing you are the kind of person who doesn't follow through. Consistency does the opposite. It builds an internal reputation. You begin to trust yourself, and that self-trust becomes confidence. Not the loud kind, but the quiet kind that doesn't need validation. There's a reason older, wiser people sound repetitive. They're not out of ideas. They're trying to save you from neglecting the obvious. Drink water, tell the truth. Save money, read, exercise, show up, be patient. None of this is exciting. All of it is life-changing. Munger once said that avoiding stupidity is easier than seeking brilliance. Neglect is a form of slow stupidity. Consistency is quiet intelligence practiced daily. One leads to regret, the other leads to freedom. And here's the deepest truth. The reward of consistency is not just success. It's peace. It's waking up without the weight of unfinished business. It's knowing that even when outcomes are uncertain, your process is sound. Neglect steals peace long before it steals results. Consistency gives peace long before it gives rewards. If you're listening to this and feeling a little uncomfortable, that's a good sign. Discomfort is clarity knocking, not to shame you, but to wake you up, because the cost of neglect is already accumulating whether you acknowledge it or not. And the reward of consistency is waiting patiently for your first small step. Neglect doesn't just cost you results, it costs you identity. Over time, what you ignore begins to define you more than what you attempt. You don't become what you dream about, you become what you tolerate. Charlie Munger understood this deeply. He believed character was shaped less by big moral decisions and more by small daily behaviors that slowly harden into personality. Think about how people talk about regret later in life. They rarely say, "I made one huge mistake." They say, "I knew what I should have done, but I didn't do it for years. I stayed silent. I stayed comfortable. I stayed distracted." Neglect is rarely dramatic, but it's emotional. Damage is devastating because it leaves you wondering who you might have been. There is a special kind of pain that comes from knowing you wasted time, not because you were incapable, but because you were inconsistent. That pain doesn't show up immediately. It waits, it matures, and then one day it sits beside you quietly and asks, "Why didn't you take this seriously when you had the chance?" Munger warned against drifting. He believed most people don't ruin their lives intentionally, they drift into mediocrity by default. Drift happens when you don't choose consistency, when you don't set standards, when you let days happen to you instead of deciding how they should be lived. Drift feels harmless, but drift always moves downhill. Now here's the shift. Consistency doesn't just change outcomes, it changes how you see yourself. The moment you commit to doing small things reliably, something internal begins to reorganize. You start to respect yourself. And self-respect is the foundation of everything meaningful. Without it, no success ever feels enough. With it, even struggle feels honorable. Let me tell you something most motivational speeches get wrong. Consistency does not require perfect days. It requires honest days. Days where you show up tired. Days where you do less, but you still do something. Munger admired people who could endure boredom and discomfort without quitting. That's a rare skill, and it's a decisive advantage. Look at relationships. Neglect doesn't look like cruelty. It looks like not listening, not calling back, not saying thank you, not being present. And then one day, the relationship feels cold, and people say it just happened. No, it was practiced. Consistency in care builds connection. Neglect dissolves it silently. Look at finances. People don't go broke overnight. They ignore small expenses. They delay saving, they avoid learning. Consistency in simple financial habits creates security. Neglect creates anxiety that never fully leaves. Look at learning. The world rewards those who keep learning long after school ends. One article a day, one concept understood deeply, one skill improved gradually. Munger was a lifelong learner not because it was glamorous, but because he respected reality. Reality changes. Neglecting learning is neglecting relevance. Here's the hardest truth. Consistency often feels thankless in the beginning. No applause, no visible progress, just repetition. This is where most people quit. They mistake lack of immediate feedback for lack of value, but compounding doesn't work on your emotional timetable. It works on reality's timetable. Neglect, on the other hand, gives immediate comfort and delayed pain. Consistency gives immediate discomfort and delayed freedom. This is the trade nobody escapes. You either pay now or pay later. The only choice is when, and with what interest rate. If part one was about awareness, part two is about responsibility. Not guilt, responsibility. The empowering kind. Because once you see the cost clearly, you also see the opportunity clearly. Every small, consistent act is a vote for the person you are becoming. Every neglected responsibility is a vote in the opposite direction. And the good news, the deeply human and hopeful news is this. You are never too far behind to start being consistent. Compounding works from wherever you begin. But it only works if you begin. There comes a moment in every thoughtful life when you realize something unsettling but freeing. No one is coming to rescue you from the cost of your neglect. And no one can steal the reward of your consistency either. This is where personal responsibility stops feeling heavy and starts feeling powerful. Charlie Munger believe deeply in facing reality as it is, not as we wish it to be. N, reality says this: your daily habits are writing your future, whether you pay attention or not. Most people wait for intensity. They wait for motivation, inspiration, a crisis, or a perfect plan. Consistent people wait for none of that. They move forward even when nothing feels special. They understand that waiting to feel ready is just another refined form of neglect. There is a quiet dignity in showing up daily, not with drama, not with speeches, but with action. One of Munger's core beliefs was that reliability is vastly underrated. If people can rely on you, opportunities find you, trust accumulates, doors open quietly, consistency turns you into someone others can bet on. And here's something rarely said out loud: consistency protects you from your own worst impulses. On bad days, it keeps you from quitting. On good days, it keeps you from becoming arrogant. It creates a steady rhythm that anchors you when emotions fluctuate. Neglect leaves you at the mercy of moods. Consistency gives you stability. Think about self-respect again. Every time you do what you said you would do, even when no one is watching, you deposit into an internal account. Over time, that account becomes confidence. Not the loud, fragile kind, but the calm kind that doesn't need reassurance. Neglect withdraws from that account until you start doubting yourself in ways you can't explain. Munger often spoke about building a margin of safety. Consistency creates a margin of safety in life. Physical health gives you resilience. Financial discipline gives you options. Emotional consistency gives you steadiness in chaos. Neglect removes those buffers until every small problem feels like a crisis. Now let's talk about fear, because fear is often disguised as neglect. People don't neglect because they are lazy. They neglect because they are afraid of failing, afraid of not being good afraid of discovering their limits, so they delay, distract, and avoid. Consistency is courageous because it forces you to face reality incrementally instead of catastrophically. There's a strange irony here. The things we avoid to protect our comfort end up creating the most discomfort later. The conversations we don't have become emotional distance. The skills we don't build become insecurity. The discipline we don't practice becomes chaos. Munger would say this is not bad luck. This is predictable human error. Consistency is not about control, it's about alignment. Aligning your actions with your values, aligning your present behavior with your future self. When those align, life feels less fragmented. You stop living with the constant tension of knowing what to do but not doing it. And let me tell you something deeply human. Consistency does not make you rigid. It makes you free. Free from regret. Free from self-betrayal. Free from constantly starting over. Neglect traps you in cycles. Consistency breaks them. If you feel behind in life, consistency is the fastest way to catch up without burning out, not by doing more, but by doing enough regularly. Munger admired endurance over intensity because endurance wins in a long game. And life is the longest game you'll ever play. So if part 2 was about responsibility, part 3 is about resolve, the quiet decision to stop drifting, to stop negotiating with your better judgment, to stop underestimating the power of small daily actions. You don't need a dramatic overhaul. You need a standard, one you can keep even on your worst days. That's how consistency stops being an effort and starts becoming identity. At some point, wisdom stops being something you admire and becomes something you must live. You can understand the cost of neglect intellectually. You can agree with the reward of consistency philosophically. But life only changes when those ideas touch your daily behavior. Charlie Munger believed that insight without action is just another form of self-deception. Imagine your future self for a moment, not the idealized version, but the realistic one shaped by your current patterns. That future self is either quietly thanking you or silently resenting you. There is no neutral outcome. Neglect always leaves evidence. Consistency always leaves receipts. Most people underestimate how much pain neglect creates simply because it arrives slowly. But slow pain is dangerous. You adapt to it. You normalize it until one day you realize you've been living below your potential for so long that it feels like home. Munger would say this is how intelligent people end up with unintelligent lives. Consistency, on the other hand, rewires what feels normal. Discipline becomes comfort. Growth becomes expectation. Integrity becomes habit. And once that happens, you no longer need constant motivation. You've changed the environment inside yourself. Here's something profoundly reassuring. You don't have to win every day. You just have to avoid losing the same way repeatedly. Avoiding obvious neglect is often enough to create extraordinary results over time. Don't lie to yourself. Don't ignore your health. Don't stop learning. Don't disrespect time. These are not heroic acts. They are sane ones. Munger often talked about living with fewer regrets by making fewer dumb mistakes. That's what consistency really is. A system for reducing regret. A way of protecting your future from your present impulses. A way of turning good intentions into lived reality. And let's be honest, the world doesn't need more talkers. It needs more steady people, people who show up, people who finish what they start, people who can be trusted with small things, because small things are never small in the long run. Neglect shrinks your world. Options disappear. Energy fades. Confidence erodes. Consistency expands your world. You gain leverage. You gain credibility. You gain calm. And perhaps most importantly, you gain the quiet pride of knowing you did not waste the gift of time. There is a certain peace that comes from living consistently. You stop fearing the future because you know you're preparing for it daily. You stop resenting the past because you know you did the best you could with what you knew. That peace is rare, and it's earned, not given. So if you're standing at a crossroads right now, unsure of what to do next, remember this. You don't need to change everything. You need to stop neglecting one important thing and start being consistent with one meaningful action. Do that long enough and your life will begin to shift in ways that feel almost unfair. Because the truth is simple, and it's the kind of truth Charlie Munger spent a lifetime repeating. What you neglect will eventually cost you. What you consistently nurture will eventually reward you, always. One day, long from now, you will look back at this season of your life, not at what you hoped for, not at what you planned, but at what you practiced. And in that moment, clarity will be unavoidable. You will see that your life did not move forward because of luck or talent alone. It moved in the direction of your daily behavior. The cost of neglect is not just failure. It is the slow loss of belief in yourself. It is the quiet voice that says you could have done more, been more, lived more honestly. And that voice never truly goes away. It only grows louder with time. But the reward of consistency is something far rarer and far more valuable than applause or status. It is self-respect. It is peace of mind. It is the deep, unshakable knowledge that you did not betray your own potential, even when outcomes were uncertain. Your effort was not. Charlie Munger understood that a well-lived life is built by avoiding obvious mistakes and repeating simple virtues. Show up. Tell the truth. Keep learning. Take care of your body. Honor your word. These choices may feel small today, but they are shaping the person you will spend the rest of your life with. So don't wait for motivation. Don't wait for perfect conditions. Don't wait for permission. Life is already keeping score. Make sure it's counting something you're proud of, because in the end, you won't be measured by your intentions. You'll be measured by what you consistently did and what you quietly refused to neglect. And if you remember nothing else, remember this. The future is built in ordinary moments, by ordinary actions repeated faithfully. Choose them wisely.